You ever look back and realize the thing that changed your whole life was just a can of paint and a woman with too much time on her hands? Yeah, that's how my story goes. If you told me when I bought my house in Oak Ridge Estates that the biggest threat to my peace wasn't the economy or wild weather, but a woman named Karen Wilkins, I would have laughed in your face. But trust me, nobody's laughing now. Not after what went down on my street. See, Oak Ridge always looked like the kind of place where trouble never really stuck. Big old maples lining the sidewalks. Lawns like green velvet, American flags on every porch. I'd wave at neighbors, grill out on Sundays, keep my yard just tidy enough to blend in. For 5 years, life was easy, the way I always pictured making it would feel. But then Karen, queen of the clipboard, decided I was her new project. You know the type. Karen strutted up and down the block every morning, sunglasses perched like a crown, beige pantsuit ironed sharper than her tone, and a plastic clipboard full of everyone's business. She was the HOA president, God help us, and her favorite sport was catching people with their trash cans an inch out of place or their grass 2 blades too tall. She'd slap violation notices on your door before you finished your morning coffee. Her catchphrase, "I'm just maintaining community standards," was code for "I own you." Most of us kept our heads down, paid our dues, waved politely at meetings, let her drone on about property values and shrub height. I learned early. You don't poke the bear. I never missed a payment, kept my yard squared away, even swapped out my mailbox when she suggested it was getting weathered. I wasn't looking for trouble, but apparently, trouble had a thing for me. It started with my front door. One Saturday last April, I decided my old faded gray door needed a facelift. I picked a simple navy blue, nothing wild, just a little color, to set off the white trim. I'm not reckless. I double-checked the HOA bylaws. Neutral colors were allowed, and half a dozen houses already had blue or green doors. I even filled out the architectural review form, dropped it in the mailbox, and waited the required 2 weeks. The bylaws were clear. No answer meant you were good to go. So I painted. The paint was still tacky when my doorbell rang. You can guess who it was. Karen, standing there like she'd caught me robbing a bank. She had that tight smile, the one that says, "I'm about to ruin your day, but I'm going to be polite about it." She goes, "Excuse me, Michael, but that color hasn't been approved by the architectural committee. You'll need to repaint immediately or face fines of $50 a day." She didn't even look at the door, just wrote me up on the spot. Now, I'm not a hothead. I calmly explained, maybe too calmly, that I'd followed every step, quoted the bylaw, and waited the required time. Karen's smile wobbled for a second, but then she shrugged and said, "Well, I never received your paperwork. Rules are rules." And just like that, she walked off, heels clicking like a metronome of doom. I knew better than to get in a yelling match. Instead, I emailed Dan, the HOA treasurer, just asking if my form ever made it to him. He replied an hour later, "Yes, received, logged, and timestamped." I thought, great. That's that. 3 days later, I came home and found a neon orange violation notice taped to my door, along with a bill for $150 and a letter accusing me of willfully violating HOA rules. To top it off, the letter said I owed $450 in unpaid dues. Now, I'm the kind of guy who keeps his bank statements alphabetized. I knew every payment was made on time, every single month. That's when a little light bulb went off. This wasn't about the color of my door anymore. This was something else. I pulled out every record I had, emails, checks, bank statements. Sent it all to the entire HOA board in a formal dispute letter, politely explaining my case. Next morning, my phone rings. I barely get out a hello before Karen launches into me, furious. "How dare you go behind my back to the board? You're undermining my authority." No greeting, no pleasantries, just straight to the threat. Let me back up a sec. This was the moment I realized I wasn't dealing with a stickler for rules. I was dealing with a bully, maybe even a crook. If she could fabricate a debt against me, what about neighbors who didn't keep records? It got my wheels turning. So I started poking around. Casual conversations with folks up and down the block, nothing too obvious. That's when Elaine, lives 2 houses down, sweet lady, makes killer banana bread, told me she'd been hounded for $900 in back dues, even though she'd set up autopay. She had the receipts, too. Then Tom, across the street, got fined for an unapproved patio extension. Except Tom doesn't even have a patio, just a patch of dirt and a rusty grill. It didn't take a genius to see the pattern. Karen was inventing violations, charging random fines, and the money? Well, nobody seemed to know where it was actually going. I got mad. Not shout at the sky mad, focused mad. I filed a written request for 3 years of HOA financial records. The law says the board has to provide them to any homeowner who asks. Karen dragged her feet, said the records were being organized. That's when I went to the bank and asked for deposit records on every HOA check I'd ever written. What I found made my stomach drop. Most of my payments hit the official HOA account, but 3 checks, big ones, had gone to a different account entirely. Same name, but 1 number off. You know that sinking feeling when you realize something's way off and you can't unsee it? Yeah, that was me in the middle of the bank lobby. I went straight to Dan, the treasurer. He's a numbers guy, always nervous, but when I showed him the copies of my checks, he looked pale as milk. Michael, he said, I only record what goes into the main account. Karen sometimes handles deposits herself, but I've never seen those slips. We sat down right there and started cross-checking every transaction. It didn't take long. In the past 2 years, nearly $35,000 in homeowner payments were just missing. Not on any official books. Not on any spreadsheet Dan had access to. Just vanished. Word got around quick. The HOA vice president called an emergency board meeting. Karen was sick that day, conveniently enough. I sat at the end of the table while everyone pored over the evidence. Fake fines, phony violations, whole piles of money missing. Karen had been running an old-school scam, funneling our dues into a personal slush fund and hiding it behind bureaucracy. The board acted fast. Karen was booted out of the HOA presidency before she could even defend herself. They called the cops, sent off every scrap of evidence, and put a freeze on the accounts. I thought that'd be the end of it. Nope. The very next day, I heard knocking, hard, frantic. I opened the door, and there she was, Karen. Mascara running, clutching her purse like a lifeline, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. How could you do this to me? She cried. I've given my life to this community. She stood there, waiting for sympathy, but I was done with that. Karen, this isn't personal. It's about evidence, I told her, and that was that. She stormed off, and for once, the sound of her heels fading down my driveway was music to my ears. 2 days later, police came and took her away in handcuffs, right past my navy blue door, which, by the way, still looked great. Turns out she'd siphoned off more than $73,000 over the years. She'd been living large, spending our money on vacations, fancy handbags, you name it. At her sentencing 6 months later, she tried to play the victim, tears, quivering lip. The whole show, she whispered, I was just borrowing it. I was going to pay it back. Nobody bought it. The judge didn't even blink. Now, every time I walk past that door, I can't help but grin. It's a little battered, sure, but it's still navy blue, and it's still standing. That door set everything in motion. It was the domino that toppled the queen, so to speak. So here's my question to you. Have you ever stood up to someone who thought they were untouchable? What did you do when the person in charge started making up rules just to keep you in line? Was it worth the fight? I want to hear your stories. Drop a comment. Tell me what justice looks like where you live. And hey, if you ever find yourself facing down a Karen with a clipboard, remember, keep your receipts. Stand your ground, and don't ever let the bullies win.